In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro reaffirmed that the country will never be a colony or a slave of any empire, while calling on the people to prepare to defend the country's peace. In Haiti, dozens of people were killed in a fishing village north of the capital in the latest massacre carried out by the country's criminal groups. And in Palestine, a growing number of Israeli soldiers are refusing to return to fight in Gaza, while the regime continues with its plans to occupy Palestinian territory. Hello and welcome to From the South, from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. My name is Pablo Micheliche. We begin with the news. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro reiterated that all Venezuelan people must guarantee the peace, security and territorial integrity of the nation, exercising their right to self-defense against any aggression from U.S. imperialism. During the 17th anniversary of the youth of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, the president highlighted the leading role of Venezuelan youth in the current international context, marked by imperialist threats from the United States and media campaigns that seek to justify aggressions against sovereign and independent peoples. In that sense, the Venezuelan head of state applauded the success of Operation Independence 200, led by the country's security forces to guarantee the defense of peace and stability of the entire national territory.
This symbol, the fruit of the effort of our army, a liberating day, this immense symbol that we have here, and that the youth care for, is not seen, remember that never again. Never again. Boys, never again. Beloved people, can Venezuela be humiliated by any empire that believes itself superior? Never again. Can Venezuela be a colony? Never again. A slave, and we have to guarantee it day by day. So I feel proud and happy that the empire that Pizarro represented is still here, represented in his defeat, and that the defeat of his empire represents also the symbol of our holy victorious, which is perpetual, which is eternal, and which is blessed by Almighty God.
In another part of his address, President Nicolás Maduro affirmed that the United States is far from being a role model for the youth around the world.
Supremacy, revenge, hatred and violence are invading every corner of the United States. They want to present themselves as the example for the world. But our imperial and violent northern neighbor is far from being an example for what the youth of world looks for, which is peace, coexistence, brotherhood, development, happiness, and freedom.
We go now to Panama. President José Raúl Mulino refused to grant free transit through the Panama Canal to U.S. warships, a demand that, if accepted, will violate the Constitution and the Neutrality Treaty. Our colleague Greka Chandiramani tells us more.
Faced with a demand that had been on the table for 9 months, President Mulino used the law as his only weapon. The refusal to grant free transit to United States ships was not based on a question of political opportunity or sovereignty, but on a cold legal analysis. The proposal violates the legal framework that Panama is obligated to comply with.
I have been very clear with the United States that I cannot take any position that violates the Constitution and violates the Neutrality Treaty. No matter how you look at this issue, it violates the treaty. So I cannot do it. I cannot do it.
Although President Trump's inflammatory rhetoric has subsided, the pressure on Panama has not disappeared, it has transformed. Experts point out that this is a calculated strategy.
Trump's style is one that creates chaos, but it is a chaos that is perhaps deliberate because confusion in geopolitics plays into the hands of those in power. And in terms of power, the strongest power is the one that will undoubtedly benefit from the disorder in this geopolitical transition. The disorder is totally calculated and is being generated by a personality whose business experience is that of transferring to the geopolitical level, without a doubt, is part of a resource that has played in favor of the hegemon and generates uncertainty at the international level.
A disorder that finds its concrete expression in a document that many consider the greatest threat to Panamanian sovereignty in years. This is the controversial Memorandum of Understanding signed by both countries that brought United States soldiers back to the country, and who have now been stationed for months at 3 Panamanian bases, working in supposed cooperation with agents of the local security forces.
Cualquier otro arreglo que se haga en la oscuridad de lo que debe ser la vocación patriótica.
Any other agreement made in the shadows of what should be the patriotic vocation of Panamanians is a legal aberration and is already being challenged before the Supreme Court of Justice, because no memorandum can override the principles contained in international treaties, such as the Treaty of Neutrality.
Por encima de principios contenidos en tratados internacionales como es el Tratado de Neutralidad.
Frente a lo que se califica como una aberración jurídica.
Faced with what is considered a legal aberration, the battle is being fought in the courts. But the question that arises from civil society is inevitable beyond lawsuits. What can citizens do to defend what is theirs? A call that not only appeals to action, but also to the conscience of those in power.
Nosotros en nuestro país, ¿cuáles son las cosas que tenemos que accionar en este momento para defender?
What are we doing in our country? What steps do we need to take at this time to defend our sovereignty? To reiterate the need to respect the Neutrality Treaty because one of the parties to that treaty, the United States, is violating neutrality.
Está irrumpiendo en contra de la neutralidad.
Al final, el dilema que enfrenta.
In the end, the dilemma facing Panama goes beyond a memorandum or a toll. It is a test of national vocation. A reminder that sovereignty is not an abstract concept, but a daily decision made in the Palace of Las Garzas, in the courts, and in the streets. The outcome of this geopolitical struggle, which pits Panamanian legality against Washington's interests, is still to be written.
Washington aún está por escribirse. Reca Chandiramani, TeleSUR, Ciudad de Panamá.
In the United States, Donald Trump has initiated a cultural revolution with the aim of rewriting the country's official history. This cultural purge includes the censorship of museums exhibitions, the cancellation of LGBTQ+ theater and music productions, and the development of guidelines for food exchanges in federal institutions. Exhibitions on the immigrant experience and the Latin community have been removed, and directors of national museums have resigned or been fired. The White House has issued orders to remove works of art considered inconsistent with the president's vision. These actions have been seen as a betrayal of democratic traditions and an attempt to suppress the truth. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news update and much more. We will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Haiti, dozens of people were killed in a fishing village north of the capital in the latest massacre carried out by the country's criminal groups. According to Joseph Louis Baptiste, a local government official, at least 42 people were killed in La Bouderie, including a 4-year-old child and his family. Baptiste also said that the killings began over the weekend and are still ongoing, noting that the criminal group set fire to La Bouderie and are now attempting to attack the nearby town of Arcahé, while the police are trying to stop them. According to the official, the massacre was apparently triggered by the killing of a criminal leader known as Vladimir, a member of a coalition of criminal groups called Beef and Sam, which has looted several communities in Port-au-Prince and other areas. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro said that one of the causes of violence in the country is European drug trafficking, and this requires a constant fight against drugs, which causes thousands of victims in the country. Our colleague Hernán Tobar gives us the details.
In the context of the signing of the Cauca Pact, a government policy that seeks to end years of inequality and lack of territorial investment in a department plagued by violence. President Gustavo Petro asserted that European drug traffickers allied with the right wing of that continent are one of the factors causing violence in the country, in addition to high demand in those markets.
La extrema derecha europea se alía con los narcotraficantes.
The far right in Europe is in alliance with Latin American drug traffickers who live there and are killing people in Colombia. I invite you to come and coordinate the search for these men. There is Mr. Marcet, if you want a name there in Europe.
Señores, el señor Marcet, si quieren un nombre, allá en Europa.
Una violencia
Violence that in this department alone has resulted in the murder of 29 social leaders, 4 peace signatories, and 4 massacres this year alone. A growing violence that is caused by the actions of illegal armed groups involved in drug trafficking and the management of illegal crops, in addition to the historical neglect of the state in several regions.
Colombia is suffering from the drug war, the war between mafias with the presence of armed groups in the territory, which means hundreds of thousands of displaced people, death, entire areas of Colombia, at least 300 of the 1,200 municipalities, are subjected to violence due to the greed of those who support drug trafficking, through the actions of national and international mafias.
Pareciera que Europa quiere hablar de guerra.
Mientras el presidente hace estas denuncias,
While the president makes these accusations, the commander of the Colombian military forces made a foray into the United States to ensure that the country is not desertified in the fight against drugs and drug trafficking, a link that, according to the Colombian ambassador to this country, Daniel Garcia, must be maintained and strengthened. Given the historical cooperation between the two countries and the mutual benefit that has led to the seizure of more than 2,510 tons of cocaine in the last 3 years.
During these 3 years of government, we have achieved the destruction of more than 16,200 coca pasta-based laboratories, affecting the first stage of the transformation of the leaf, but we have also destroyed more than 610 cocaine hydrochloride laboratories, where cocaine-based paste is refined and turned into hydrochloride. It is a great effort that we make in that link of the transformation.
President Petro's government has insisted that the fight against drug trafficking should not only be addressed from a military perspective, but should also have a social perspective, and that consuming countries such as those in Europe and the United States should address this scourge.
Hernán Darío Tobar Gaitán, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
And in Ecuador, President Daniel Noboa called for a march for peace and security last Thursday. The president's participation in this protest has generated reactions of rejection as analysts, political and social sectors reiterate that his government has failed to provide a peaceful life in the country. Details with our colleague Gabriela Mena.
Daniel Noboa's government has become the focus of criticism and questioning in light of the laws it promotes and the actions it takes, the most recent being a march for peace and security, which is being questioned for multiple reasons. According to analysts, Noboa is calling for a mobilization in an attempt to shift responsibility away from himself, since the state is responsible for providing security.
It is a disclaimer of responsibility for what the government has to provide, that is to say, the slogan of the march that took place in Quito and Guayaquil was, "Ecuador for peace with justice," but in reality, it is exactly the same government of Daniel Noboa that must provide justice and peace. Daniel Noboa is a figure and a politician who has clearly broken with the Ecuadorian political manual. Politically, many things that are happening in Ecuador are not right.
But there is more. The executive is also accused of misappropriation of state funds, as there is alleged use of state funds for the march, both in banners and stages, and in contracts for its organization.
There is economic opacity surrounding the protests. The protests are free of charge. There are resources, there are donors, there is money that needs to circulate. However, it is illogical to think that the entire state apparatus is not involved in this.
The legislature regrets that Daniel Noboa is using resources for this type of action, instead of addressing the security crisis against which he is even marching. For Assembly Member Mariana Yumbai, the most worrying thing is that there is no way to monitor the case, nor anyone to limit the president's actions.
Unfortunately, here in the Assembly, we are not fulfilling all of our responsibilities. We should be monitoring, but unfortunately there is a pro-government majority here that is not fully complying, so we believe it is totally misguided to carry out these marches, instead of dedicating ourselves to working and solving the country's problems.
For analyst Alfredo Espinoza, we are experiencing a multiple crisis scenario at the hands of a government that seeks to camouflage its difficulties with controversial marches and strives to position its narratives, generating public discussion around what it creates.
This is a big smoke screen. This is a big smoke screen that covers up other types of problems that occur daily in Ecuador, and that do generate discontent among citizens. I am referring to the crisis in the healthcare system, both in social security and public health.
However, the government maintains that its actions are appropriate. Meanwhile, various social groups have announced that they will respond by organizing a large-scale protest against the government in the coming weeks.
We have a second short break coming up before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at TeleSUR English. There you will be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. Israeli occupation troops have left more than 50,000 Palestinians homeless in the Gaza Strip over the last few days. The Palestinian Civil Defense warns that the humanitarian crisis has worsened due to the massive ground offensive and intense bombing of several areas of the Palestinian enclave. The authority states that Zionism destroyed nearly 12 residential buildings with more than 7 stories, including about 500 apartments, along with the demolition of 120 properties, which led to the forced displacement of residents. The Israeli Defense Forces issue evacuation orders throughout the Gaza Strip the day before, after several days of attacks. And in Israel, a growing number of Israeli soldiers and their mothers are refusing to return to fight in Gaza, while their regime continues with its plans to occupy Palestinian territory. Despite the risk of imprisonment, newly formed groups are announcing their refusal to fight in Gaza. Israelis have staged mass protests demanding a ceasefire deal and the return of the remaining 48 captives, 20 of whom are believed to be alive, slamming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for prolonging the war for political purposes. Many opponents, including former senior military officials, fear the offensive will achieve little and endanger the life of Israelis held there. Israel also faces heavy international criticism over the humanitarian catastrophe unleashed by the war and its blockade of Gaza. And in Palestine, child malnutrition in Gaza is reaching catastrophic levels, UNICEF has warned, with the latest evidence showing a record number of children suffering acute malnutrition. New data shows that in August, 13.5% of children screened across Gaza were found to be acutely malnourished, a sharp increase from 8.3% in July. Conditions are even more dire in Gaza City, where famine was officially confirmed last month. There, 19% of children admitted to health facilities showed signs of malnutrition, up from 16% the previous month. In raw numbers, at least 12,800 children were identified as acutely malnourished in August. However, UNICEF warns that the real figure may be significantly higher, as intensified violence and evacuation orders led to the closure of 10 treatment centers in Gaza City and northern Gaza, reducing the number of children able to be screened. Change topic. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama introduced the new anti-corruption minister Diala, an AI-generated bot. The European country is the first in the world to incorporate a non-physical person into its cabinet. According to Rama, Diala was created with the aim of promoting a country with public tenders free of corruption. The minister has been working in the government since January, where she started as a digital assistant, helping citizens use the e-Albania platform for government services. Experts say her contribution in the political sphere could lead to transparency in public administration, which is key to Albania's application to become a full member of the European Union in 2030. The father of Irina Sarukska, a 23-year-old Ukrainian woman who was killed while traveling on a local light rail train in Charlotte, North Carolina, United States, was unable to attend her funeral due to Ukraine's mobilization laws. Sarukska's father, who remained in Ukraine because of martial law restrictions, was prohibited from leaving as most men aged 18 to 60 are barred from exiting the country under these rules. Ukraine has tightened the conscription laws to address battlefield manpower shortages, leading to accusations of brutality during forced conscriptions, including beatings and abductions of men. Critics, including Hungary's foreign minister, have described Ukraine's recruitment practices as an open manhunt, while Moscow has condemned these measures as sacrificing citizens for a Western-backed proxy war against Russia. A powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck off the east coast of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula on September 12, with its epicenter located about 111 kilometers east of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky at a depth of 39.5 kilometers. The quake caused some alarm among residents, but so far there have been no reports of severe damage or casualties. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued a warning for hazardous tsunami wave up to 1 meter, potentially affecting nearby Russian coastlines. However, the warning was later lifted. This earthquake is the largest aftershock to date, following a massive magnitude 8.8 earthquake that struck the region in late July 2025, which had previously triggered Pacific-wide tsunami alerts. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Pablo Micheliche. Thank you for watching.